Nigeria strongly believes in South-South cooperation, financial restructuring, debt forgiveness.
What happens when Africa's largest economy finally claims its seat at the global decision-making table? In Rio de Janeiro, at the BRICS Summit, Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu didn't just speak, he challenged the entire global structure. And what he said may reshape how emerging nations fight for equity, power, and prosperity. Nigeria enters the BRICS stage. On January 17, 2025, Nigeria officially joined the BRICS bloc not as a full member, but as one of its 9 inaugural partner countries. This marked a new phase in Nigeria's global diplomatic evolution. Alongside Belarus, Bolivia, Cuba, Kazakhstan, Malaysia, Thailand, Uganda, and Uzbekistan, Nigeria became part of a new tier created just months earlier at the 16th BRICS Summit in Kazan, Russia. This wasn't symbolic inclusion, it was strategic integration. The timing was crucial. BRICS was undergoing its biggest expansion ever, and under Brazil's rotating presidency, it opened new pathways for emerging economies to influence the global conversation. The decision to admit Nigeria was not random. As the world's 6th most populous nation and a key African economic power, Nigeria's participation made BRICS not only more representative, but also more powerful. 2 weeks ago, at the 17th BRICS Summit in Rio de Janeiro, Nigeria made its debut. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu stepped onto the stage not just to observe, but to lead. And what he said there could ripple far beyond Brazil. Reform global power structures. President Tinubu's speech wasn't wrapped in diplomatic ambiguity. It was direct, bold, and rooted in the realities that many emerging economies face. He called for a reevaluation, a restructuring of the current global governance system, as well as the global financial and healthcare architectures that continue to favor the developed world. Tinubu pointed out that while Africa contributes the least to global carbon emissions, it suffers disproportionately from the climate crisis. In his words, Africa has contributed the least to global emissions, but suffers the most. It was a line that captured the imbalance that so many African countries have been highlighting for decades, now echoed in the halls of BRICS. For him, the solution is not charity, it's justice. Justice in climate finance, justice in technology transfer, justice in healthcare access. And above all, a fair seat at the global table where decisions that impact billions are made behind closed doors. Healthcare inequality and a new path forward. President Tinubu didn't shy away from healthcare either. His message was clear. The current system is built for the few, not the many. He emphasized that non-communicable diseases like cancer, diabetes, and hypertension are devastating communities across Africa. Yet global health funding continues to flow in directions that leave many regions under-resourced and overlooked. He urged BRICS to evolve, not just as a bloc of economies, but as a hub for solutions. In Tinubu's view, BRICS should stand for solidarity, sustainability, self-reliance, and shared prosperity. That means pushing for universal health coverage, investing in resilient health systems, and creating affordable access to treatment for all. Especially as the world inches closer to COP30, healthcare must remain central, not an afterthought. As we approach COP30 and look to strengthen the global health system, Tinubu said, we believe BRICS must not only be a bloc for emerging economies, but also a beacon for emerging solutions and resolutions.
Well, let's turn attention now to Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, where President Bola Tinubu has called for a reevaluation of the current global governance structure and the financial and healthcare systems.
Climate justice. The environment was another key pillar of Tinubu's address. He didn't stop at criticism, he offered action. Africa is already laying down the groundwork for sustainable transformation through initiatives like the African Carbon Market Initiative and the Great Green Wall. Both are designed to combat desertification, create green jobs, and reduce carbon emissions, all while generating climate financing in a market that has long excluded African participation. Tinubu's appeal was clear. Emerging economies can lead the fight against climate change, but only if the systems are fair. That means unlocking accessible financing, transferring clean technologies at scale, and allowing Africa to trade its carbon credits on a level playing field. He believes that with real backing, COP30 can become a turning point, a moment when Africa doesn't just participate, but sets the pace. Nigeria's 2050 vision and the youth factor. The president made another point that resonated with many in the room: youth. Over 70% of Nigeria's population is under the age of 30. That's not a statistic, it's a warning and a promise. Without opportunity, that youthful population could become a burden. But with investment, innovation, and inclusion, it could become the continent's greatest asset. Tinubu explained that Nigeria is already aligning its national development with a long-term strategy, Vision 2050. This roadmap includes targets for renewable energy, urban resilience, nature-based solutions, and economic inclusion. It's not just policy, it's a commitment. We must be the architects of a future that addresses the specific needs and concerns of youths, Tinubu said. Therefore, Nigeria remains guided by our long-term vision, 2050, and nationally determined contribution. Through that lens, Nigeria is not just adapting, it's actively shaping its destiny.
Particularly in Africa. At the 17th meeting of the Global South and the Emerging Economies Bloc, President Tinubu says environmental degradation, climate crisis, and healthcare inequalities.
Why this BRICS Summit mattered more than most. The 17th BRICS Summit, hosted by President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva of Brazil, marked a strategic pivot for the organization. No longer content with being labeled an emerging bloc, BRICS is now positioning itself as a serious alternative to Western-led institutions, and the inclusion of countries like Nigeria signals a recalibration of global alliances. With multiple new partner countries admitted under Brazil's leadership, the BRICS bloc grew more diverse and more vocal. Nigeria's presence, particularly through Tinubu's address, added a powerful African voice to the table. This matters, because the very essence of global governance is being questioned and redefined in real time. Nigeria's elite team in Brazil. This shift wasn't driven by speeches alone. Behind President Tinubu stood a strategic diplomatic corps. Ambassador Yusuf Tuggar, Nigeria's Minister of Foreign Affairs, and Mr. Wale Edun, Minister of Finance, both accompanied the president to Brazil. Their mission was clear: deepen Nigeria's position within BRICS and expand its global influence through real engagement, not just appearances. Their presence reinforced that Nigeria's participation wasn't accidental. It was calculated, deliberate, and future-focused. Nigeria's entrance into the BRICS circle came with influence, not just applause. And if the nation plays its cards right, it may help steer the conversation on everything from finance reform to climate adaptation across multiple summits in the years to come. Reform or regression? One of Tinubu's strongest talking points was financial reform. The existing global financial system, largely structured after World War II, continues to reflect outdated hierarchies. Access to capital remains lopsided. African nations, even with stable credit records, often borrow at higher interest rates than countries with less economic discipline, purely due to historical risk assessments. That imbalance has to end. Tinubu called for financial restructuring, a reworking of institutions like the IMF and World Bank to reflect today's geopolitical and economic realities. And in doing so, he aligned himself with a growing number of voices from the Global South that have long felt shut out of decision-making circles. This isn't about removing the West from influence. It's about rebalancing the system to reflect the modern world and letting emerging economies shape the architecture they now contribute heavily to. What lies ahead for BRICS and Nigeria? If President Tinubu's speech in Brazil did anything, it redefined Nigeria's foreign policy narrative. No longer framed around aid or dependency, it now revolves around influence, investment, and reform. With access to BRICS's development mechanisms and economic forums, Nigeria now has opportunities to co-develop infrastructure projects, push for new trade routes and financial instruments, expand its role in South-South cooperation frameworks, shape global discussions on climate, healthcare, and technology. But this also comes with responsibility. Nigeria will need to show results fast. From renewable energy rollouts to better healthcare delivery, Tinubu's words must translate into action, and the world will be watching.
Africa has contributed the least of global emissions by some.
Tinubu's approval ratings raise questions. As President Tinubu steps into the second half of his first term, the numbers don't lie, and they paint a complex picture. A new poll by Eagle Badger Data Analytics places Tinubu's approval rating at 37.2%, while 43.4% disapprove of his performance. Another 12.2% remained neutral, and 7.2% declined to answer. That leaves one question floating across Nigeria's political circles. Is President Tinubu's administration gaining momentum or losing support? The poll, conducted between July 4th and July 10th, 2025, offers more than just numbers. It reflects the pulse of a nation experiencing high inflation, economic pressure, and the constant challenge of insecurity. Yet, there's nuance behind those figures. While 37% approval may sound modest, it's actually not far behind other world leaders grappling with tough domestic situations. How Tinubu's ratings compare globally. Across the globe, midterm ratings often reveal the gap between campaign promises and policy outcomes. In the United States, President Donald Trump, now deep into his controversial second term, currently polls at around 40%, just a few points above Tinubu. In South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa is hovering around 30%, facing backlash over persistent unemployment and energy crises. And in the UK, Prime Minister Keir Starmer's approval has dipped into the mid-20s. Even Emmanuel Macron in France struggles to stay above 29% after a wave of protests and divisive reforms. Compared to these, Tinubu's numbers are holding a fragile middle ground, but the approval gap still signals a growing discontent, especially around key issues like economic hardship, job scarcity, and national security. Why Nigerians are frustrated? It's no secret that many Nigerians are feeling the pinch of difficult reforms. The removal of fuel subsidies, while seen by economists as a necessary step to reduce government spending, has made everyday life more expensive. Food prices have surged, transport costs have doubled in many places, and while the Tax Reform Act introduced in mid-2025 promises long-term fiscal balance, most citizens haven't seen the benefits, only the burdens. Add rising insecurity in the Northwest and parts of the Middle Belt, and the public's frustration becomes clearer. People aren't just voting in elections, they're voting with their opinions. And right now, those votes reflect a country waiting for tangible progress. But with nearly 4 in 10 Nigerians still approving of the president, there's a sign that a loyal base remains. If Tinubu can convert public policy into visible day-to-day results, that number could grow heading into 2026. Naming and renaming public institutions. While managing public perception, Tinubu has also been busy reshaping Nigeria's national identity through public symbols and infrastructure. In the past 18 months, multiple government-owned properties have been renamed after either himself or other notable political figures, and each renaming tells a story. On July 18, 2025, Tinubu renamed the historic University of Maiduguri to Muhammadu Buhari University, just days after the former president passed away at age 82. It was a symbolic tribute marking the legacy of a man who had ruled both as a military leader and a democratically elected president. But not everyone viewed the move as just symbolic. Some saw it as a calculated act of political branding, reinforcing Tinubu's ties to northern elites and Buhari's loyal base. The renaming didn't stop there. Bola Ahmed Tinubu's name across the map. In December 2024, the immigration headquarters in Abuja was renamed Bola Ahmed Tinubu Technology Innovation Complex, highlighting the administration's focus on digital transformation. Then came January 2025, when the newly built military barracks in Abuja were commissioned as Bola Ahmed Tinubu Barracks. The facility includes housing, clinics, and recreational areas for service members, and the president used the moment to reaffirm his commitment to national security and the armed forces. But perhaps the most high-profile renaming took place at the heart of Nigeria's capital. In early 2025, the Abuja International Conference Center, originally built by former President Babangida, was revamped and rebranded as the Bola Ahmed Tinubu International Center. Interior halls were also renamed after top government officials, including Vice President Kashim Shettima, Chief Justice Kudirat Kekere-Ekun, Senate President Godswill Akpabio, and Speaker Tajuddin Abbas. Supporters of these moves say they reflect national pride and continuity. Critics argue that it signals vanity and overreach. But there's no denying it. Tinubu is shaping a legacy in stone, steel, and signage.
President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has urged a comprehensive re-evaluation of the global governance, financial, and healthcare systems.
A strategy rooted in symbolism. In many democracies, naming public infrastructure after sitting presidents is seen as politically risky. In Nigeria, however, it has become part of a broader legacy game. Whether these renamings help boost approval in the long run remains to be seen, but they do generate headlines, stir debate, and leave an undeniable mark. For Tinubu, this could be a long-term strategy to anchor his identity in the nation's memory, even as policy battles rage on. What to watch going forward? So, what will define Tinubu's next 2 years? The mid-year public sentiment report from EBDA promises deeper insight, especially into regional and demographic trends. But early clues suggest the president's biggest political risks are tied to economic outcomes and security performance. The Tax Reform Act, passed earlier this year, is expected to improve public finances and attract more foreign investment, but only if enforcement remains consistent. On the security front, Tinubu's directives to military leaders aim to reduce incidents of banditry and insurgency in key flashpoints like Zamfara and Borno. Whether these moves will improve the public mood is still uncertain. With national and gubernatorial elections still years away, this is Tinubu's moment to lead without distraction. Every decision from now on will shape not just approval numbers, but historical judgment. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Nigeria's entrance into BRICS will shift global power dynamics? Should emerging economies have a bigger say in global governance? And more importantly, what comes next for Nigeria on the world stage? Stay tuned. Subscribe for more exclusive global updates and behind-the-scenes diplomatic insights in Africa.